Hello and welcome to the Essential Property Podcast with your hosts, Paul Samuda and Amanda Woodward. With 45 years of combined experience in the world of property buying, selling, investing and developing, they are here to share with you their knowledge in the Stoke-on-Trent, Newcastle-under-Lyme and Crewe property market. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Essential Property Podcast. My name is Amanda Woodward and I have the pleasure of having Jasmine and Priya from the Hard Hat Developers with me. Now today we're going to be talking about their current business model of acquiring commercial property nationwide and developing residential units. So welcome Jasmine and welcome Priya.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, good stuff. So I'm going to hand it over to you guys to introduce yourselves and tell us a little about the Hard Hat Developers.
So hi everybody, I'm Jasmine and
I'm Priya.
We are the Hard Hat Developers, known on Instagram, but in life we're just Jasmine and Priya. We invest across England. We basically buy every kind of strategy except from rent to rent and SA, and our favourite kind of deals are office to resi conversions or resi to resi conversions.
Brilliant. So we're going to kick off with a few questions so we can get to know you a little bit more and for the listeners to understand what it is that you're doing and what you've been doing in and around sort of the Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire area. So you ladies are in a partnership together. I've known Jasmine for, I think, about 8 years or so now and have been keeping an eye on what she's been doing over the years and all the different developments she's been doing, and especially envious of all of her London deals. But tell us a little bit about the partnership, perhaps how you met, why you decided to go into business together, and how that has taken shape.
So Jasmine and I met in 2018. I got made redundant from working in banking in the city and kind of was dipping my toe into property. And I didn't have any friends. Well, I didn't have any property friends, as Jasmine was going to correct me. I didn't have any property friends. And I found it quite a lonely place to work. And coming from a large corporate company, I was kind of always having fun at work. So when I had to then kind of be self-employed and work alone, it was quite lonely. So Jasmine's husband was actually my best friend. I say was because he's been very quickly replaced. And sometimes he likes that, sometimes he doesn't. Yeah. He is my very good friend. And he was like, why don't you meet Jasmine? Why don't you go for a coffee? Or we actually went for a shisha, just see how you guys get on and whatever it may be. And so we met up and one meeting led to another meeting, again, just over our love for shisha and also being sushi and being able to talk about property quite freely and just basically encouraging each other and
providing like an outlet for each other, because I think that especially then it was very, even now, everyone's very happy, everything's so good, everything's so perfect. And there was not real any like honesty about kind of the struggles or the kind of not as great part of the industry, especially like working alone. So it was more of like we were able to like help each other, but also like provide like a venting outlet to kind of talk about frustrations and things that we didn't feel so great, that we didn't feel
struggling with, or
we were able to support each other
help.
through. Yeah,
we also come from very similar backgrounds as such. We both were West Londoners and we kind of both have a portfolio individually and with our family, so we kind of could resonate very quickly about how annoying parents can be working with parents. And yeah, so that kind of brought us a little bit closer together. And as my journey continued, I got a bit bored, I would say, with residential HMOs and converting them. It kind of became very rinse and repeat. And I did quite a few very quickly in my first few months of being in property. We then started, individually, both were looking at commercial, but we didn't really know that we were doing that until a little while into discussion. So then it kind of came a bit more like peer-to-peer learning. Like, oh, I found this, or what do you think about this, or how did you analyze this, or I made this analyzer, and kind of just discussion based. And actually it was very strange. We were met up one evening and Jasmine said, how would you feel about doing a project together? And I also had the same mindset and the kind of same idea in my head, but I didn't really say anything because that's just me all over. I'll just wait a little bit, suss things out, and then
I'll just say it because that's just me.
So we both had the same idea. And at that point in time, we didn't know how this relationship or partnership would form. But sometimes it does feel like we're in a deeper relationship than with our husbands because we spend so much time together. We are always constantly trying to be on top of our work and also remain friends. So it kind of just naturally evolved from studying and going to networking and learning into this partnership, and the Hard Hat developers were formed.
Fantastic. That's a brilliant introduction. So you decided that you wanted to work together. So I guess the next decision was what you were going to work on. Now, from the little bits that I know about the business, you have moved into sort of the conversion space to create residential units, like you said, either from commercial or from residential, and changing the format. But you have sort of upped the ante in terms of the size of the developments. So was that always part of the plan to start to go for a larger development, should we say?
No, I don't think it was like a conscious decision. It was like...
I had quite a loose criteria, and why we say the word loose is because sometimes in property, we think that you have to move to where the deal works, not necessarily specifically to the area. And for us, when we started with our first project, which was actually in Birmingham, we started a commercial conversion. It was, I can't remember, Jazzy, how many feet was
4,000 square foot.
4,000 square foot. So it was quite a bigger project than what we're used to. But we started, one of the reasons we started in the Midlands was because the risk was lower, the investment was lower. If you're in comparison to some of the other projects we've done where there've been £1 million purchase price, £1 million build, etc., we kind of wanted to cut our teeth into something a little bit more accessible and a little bit more low risk, which is why we started investing in commercial conversions more up north.
Yeah, I mean, that totally makes sense. And then, Jasmine, you already had some experience of investing in Stoke-on-Trent a few years ago. I remember you contacting me and saying you're looking at building a portfolio in the student market of Stoke, which is a well-established market with Staffordshire University. Has been attracting investors for a long, long time, but probably over the last perhaps 8 to 10 years has attracted quite a lot of outside investment, either from London-based investors or from large corporates. So perhaps you could share with us a little bit about the activity that has taken place in Stoke over the years.
So that when I first bought, I kind of bulk bought in like maybe a time period of like 2.5 years. And they're mixed between like multi-let, and the most I have is like a 5-bedroom HMO, and then they're between 3-bedroom and 5 bedrooms. And they're all in relatively good kind of, like all walking distance from the university. And they were always just kind of ticking over. There was never really a height. When I originally bought, there was never really like it is now. You didn't need like the highest of standards. It was, like the magnolia walls, kind of your standard carpet, it was just an easier model. And I think now moving kind of into COVID, maybe like even a year before, there's so much competition in the area that the market was becoming more and more saturated. I mean, I stopped buying in Stoke, I think do you know what? I couldn't even begin to tell you. I think I've stopped buying about 5 years ago, and I just kind of kept my portfolio there because the prices were kind of increasing and it just wasn't financially making as much sense. But the portfolio is kind of maybe like a foundation of the properties in Stoke are like a foundation of my portfolio because they tick over every year. I have quite a good team there. So I have a couple of agents, like I don't really have to worry. And when I first bought, I was going up quite often. And now I really don't even have to go up there, even when we're doing a changeover, like of students. My builders will go in, my letting agents will go, and it's just kind of a little bit easy. With COVID, for the first part of COVID in 2020 to 2021, I really didn't have a problem. There was no kind of voids, everybody was staying. And 21 going into 22, it seems to be that there's less students wanting properties. So this year has been slightly a bit more challenging of all of the years that I've had in terms of the kind of people that are wanting the properties, the amount of people looking, and a couple of them, for sake of ease, because I actually need to do a couple of renovations there for my HMOs, I've just put them onto buy-to-lets for the moment. And that works perfectly for me for the moment. And then I'll go back and revamp it a little bit when I have time. But do you know what? I think when you work with a team for so long, the amount of trust you can have with them, they're either going to get complacent or you're just going to have a groove with them. And I finally feel like I have a nice little groove with them. We can understand each other and it's just easy. And that's exactly what I wanted from my portfolio, ease.
Okay. And would you say that for anyone listening in who's considering moving on to some larger developments, would you say that you can learn a lot doing the smaller deals first and building a small portfolio before you move forward?
100%. I think to go from zero to a big development, I think is careless and I think is risky, because if you have no property experience and all of a sudden you want to go and buy, I don't know, let's for argument's sake do an office conversion, even a smaller office conversion into HMO, you have no experience of even the basics, like the basic level of conversation, understanding of price points, understanding of negotiation, understanding of timelines. Also, if it's your first project, naturally you're going to have fear, you're going to be out of your comfort, you're going to be super stressed out, you're going to second guess yourself. The minute you start doing these things, that's when mistakes happen. And I think with confidence and with experience comes efficiency. And I think in a big project, you need efficiency.
You also need to look at the level of the numbers. They're all very, very relative. So if you're investing in a house in Stoke, it's not going to be the same as a commercial project in Stoke. So it's also down to a personal risk appetite and whether you're willing to kind of make those mistakes. Obviously, they'll come at a greater cost than what a residential would come at. We're great believers in slow and steady always wins the race.
Yeah, that's actually one of our mantras in our business plan, actually, to go slow and steady, but, to go forever effectively rather than short bursts of quick profits that don't last. So I'd agree with that. We've been approached by quite a few student landlords this year who have said that they haven't been able to get tenants for the next student year ahead, either because of quality or just because of the reduction, which I guess is around the whole sort of remote learning, or people's educational decisions have changed a lot on the back of COVID in terms of what they see as a priority. So we are repurposing those for the professional market, or we are filling the summer, because you're right, in Stoke, there does tend to be a good 2 months before the next group move in. And they're not willing to take on that property because they'll just go and rent another one on the same street around the corner and they'll still save 2 months worth of rent. So what we've started to do is try and fill those voids for landlords as well, which is quite interesting. So keeping on the same theme, keeping in the same location as Stoke, Staffordshire. Now, not that these two are linked entirely, but you did recently take on a development in Leek, which is only down the road, still in an ST postcode.
January 2020, we purchased a building in Leek called the County Services Building. It was a former office. It was just shy of 11,000 square foot.
Over 11,701 square foot.
Just over, sorry. And we did convert into 21 one-bedroom apartments. Our primary exit strategy at the point in time of purchasing was to sell each individual unit, which I'll touch upon in a little bit in a minute. It was a 6-month planning process with lovely Staffordshire Council. It was an absolute nightmare.
Because it was PD and it took 6 months. So
they wanted my blood, literally. 6 months after we got planning accepted in June of 2020, I actually remember the day and I was just literally like, do we cry? Do we it's been so long. And obviously as well, we are now paying for this building when we're not actually doing anything with it. Is it a possibility of doing something? All these thoughts continuously going around your head. Anyway, so we got planning for 21 units. We had some ridiculous discharge conditions, as which is very, very normal now. And we started build in July of 2020. We actually used our team from the Midlands who travelled up to Stoke to kind of, Leek.
Staffordshire.
For me, it's all the same thing. But anyway, they travelled up primarily just because we had done quite a few commercial conversions with them in the Midlands. We trust them. We know them. It was just very easy for us. It was kind of a rinse and repeat model again. And primarily, it just allowed us the greater flexibility not to be on site every day. It kind of gave us the trust and the confidence that they could get on with the job and we can kind of continue to do with what we like to do and find new properties whilst this build was going on. Obviously, COVID hit during the build and this property in particular took quite a big beating. It was an office building on 4 floors, so it was very large. It had a lift in there. And materials were a huge, huge struggle for us. So much so, we ended up building our own storage unit on site because we have a 26 area car parking facility. We ended up building
like containers. And then filled the containers.
We essentially tried to get as much material as possible in order for us to continue to do so. But they got robbed.
Oh my goodness.
Everything just kind of under the sun possible
That could go wrong.
Went wrong.
Yeah.
We then struck a huge problem with utilities. So next, I don't know, Amanda, if you know the building, but next to the building is a doctor's surgery. We needed to excavate along their car park in order to get our utilities in. So we came to an agreement that the medical centre can use our car parking space to help the patients. We're helping your local community because it makes no difference to us. There was nothing on the car parking space. Now push comes to shove and we need to close the car park for a few days, which is our land, and we need right of access to their passage. They weren't giving it to us. So we spent 3 months back and forth. Next thing we know, we get an email one morning. Please transfer £10,000 to my account. I'm sorry. I'll let you use the car park if you give me £10,000.
Wow.
Right. So I've been letting you use my car park. You've been using my facilities with not said anything. Now you want £10,000. We don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. Are you going to say yes or no? When my utility companies turn up, are you going to say yes? Are you going to say no? What kind of predicament? We had so many conversations, so many literally heated conversations, because I just think this is all completely wrong. Jasmine was more of the mindset, come on, Priya, we've got to do it, we've got to do it, we've got to bite the bullet. And I was just like, are you nuts? This is just crazy. Anyway.
So you paid the £10,000.
Of course we did.
And you got your utilities in.
Every day is costing us. We're already due to COVID. We also have a team that needs to go in and can continue with their job. They cannot do that.
Also, getting utilities in, by the time you book a utility company to come in, that you're already in arrears. So you can't really book until you own the property. You've obviously got planning. So once you've booked it in, we've got a date. And with COVID, there was months and months of delay because they literally were just not coming out to new sites. So we then had the issue.
One thing we did do, though, which was so good, is we got a utility provider to manage all the utilities and all the new phase connections. And don't ask me what they are because I don't understand it and I don't really care to understand it. But all the kind of the meters.
It's basically a project manager for just the new utilities.
Yeah.
And they are phenomenal. And we have to obviously pay a little bit more, but the headache is alleviated, and they do a whole analysis onto the site on day one, so you kind of know what you're up against. And utilities are a huge pain. So for us, it was great to kind of alleviate that pressure, but the pressure still kind of came back on us when we have to use someone else's path as such, when pavement wasn't.
I think with property, just the minute you think that you have streamlined and you have you have able to say, okay, right, you know what, I don't have to go inside, this is not going to be a stressful thing, I've kind of managed this expectation, I've figured this out. Just as you think you have it all figured out, something else happens, and the something else is something you've never come up against before, and then you're just dealing with this whole new situation. And then when you go into your next project, you think, oh, I know this, I'm good, and it doesn't even come up in that project. So you just can't even, I think you have to go in with zero expectation of thinking you've got it all handled, because when you think you have it all handled, you won't. There'll be something.
I think that's one of the biggest things that people miss when they do start to go to the larger deals, that the internal refurbishment of a building is generally the internal refurbishment of a building. It's, one flat versus 20 flats. In theory, you're replicating the same thing, but it's more the detail, isn't it, around the planning and the access and the utilities.
All external factors, all external people. I cannot control the planners. I cannot control utility companies. I cannot control my neighbours. I don't have that control. It's not anything in my area that I can go ahead and say something to. It's all other people.
That's definitely an interesting move from the doctor's surgery, but there we go. Everyone's trying to...
They're not making enough money themselves.
During COVID, can't you imagine this?
Just anyway, extra 10 grand. You know what? This is why I don't trust nobody.
So the bill process, let's go back to Leek. The bill process happened a lot, majority of it during COVID. There are a lot of setbacks, primarily due to materials, labourers getting COVID on site, and obviously rules are very different at that point in time. The site had to close down for a period of time before they could go back on.
They had robberies on site.
So it was literally back and forth. And then what happened is we kind of made a little bit more traction. we started to get some agents involved, started doing some pricing, started to kind of work out, obviously, we're going to put these on the market. From previous projects that we've been doing, we're selling 9 units in another area. We just both had the discussion. We're like, we cannot sell 21 units. We will die. Like the paperwork and the admin and the time taken, it's not something that we want to do. So we ended up looking for a provider, and essentially we sold the building in December of last year to a provider. And essentially it was one sale, very stressful sale, but essentially it worked out for us and we sold the 21 units in one go. However, during the time period to get that sale to go, we completed the build. When did I get married? July. September. We completed the build in September, 100% complete. But we had from September to December just then to push the sale through, which is obviously, it's nerve-wracking. Like, what do you do?
Because you put all your eggs in one basket,
Exactly.
hoping that if you're selling 21 units and say you've sold 12 of them or 15 of them, then you can almost kind of like, all right, you're not so as stressed. Yeah, you
probably.
But with one person buying all 21 units, and if anything goes a little bit left, you've lost so much time. And when we started having conversations, and part of it was done up to their standard. So we're also now we're basically at your feet a little bit, but it all worked itself out. And robberies and all were sold just under 2 years, start to finish.
I actually remember it was my sister was getting married and calls were coming in and I was like, I actually don't think this is the right day for this. But literally we were standing outside the front of my house. Sister's wedding day.
I was getting phone calls at the religious day. Oh, when we were at the religious temple, I was actually like, literally everyone was eating and I was literally getting phone calls and I was having to step out taking phone calls. And I was like, Priya can't talk today because like her sister's quite literally getting married.
And Jasmine was surprised me and I couldn't take my sister's big Indian wedding. So she was doing some jobs for me because I just literally, it was absolute carnage.
This is the stuff nobody tells you about. There's no work-life balance.
I'm getting in the car to take my sister to Birmingham after she's got married to whatever. Jasmine's like, can you call me? I'm like, no, not right now. I can't. I've got to get my sister married. Like, are you nuts? So yeah.
So going on.
It was also quite challenging during COVID to always be up there. So we're very thankful for the great build team we had. Even we obviously used some bank finance on this. It essentially got to the point where the bank turned around and said, can you just Zoom call us because we can't come to site? We don't want to. We're worried, whatever. Everybody had their own kind of level of security or what's the word? Preference, safety during COVID and their own preference as well. So during those period of time, we kind of were fortunate enough. And it also showed us a new way of working because obviously we live in London. Stoke is 4 hours from us. Leek is 4 hours, 3.5 on a good day. So it showed us a new, easier way of working where we can still be so involved, but not necessarily spend 8 hours in a day driving there and back. So for that, I think COVID has changed the way of the world for the better.
We've relinquished some control.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you. So just for our listeners who may not be up to speed with how it works when you are selling a development, or when you say that you sold it to a provider, just explain a little bit more about not necessarily who they were, but the sector that they're in and the benefits of that.
Yeah, it can be anybody. It could be like a
care providers, pension funds, investment funds. There's people that come from abroad that they have investors that want to buy portfolios. So.
It can also be like your local authorities that are purchasing for themselves and they've got like a quota to hit. So basically any large corporation that has a budget to purchase certain housing.
Yeah.
So be it long term for low yield, be it like literally like care providers, emergency housing sectors. There's so many different like large corporations that have a budget to do so. The benefit is that you don't have to go through individual unit sales. You're paying less in the, well, I mean, you'd hope, but you're paying less in the legal fees. You're like less time involved in it. And also, although for the most part, you take a little bit less of a profit, it's just an easier kind of, it's just a cleaner in and out situation.
Yeah.
I also think it just depends at that point in time, because had Jasmine and I sat out and waited for the 21 sales, we're very impatient people. And kind of sometimes you just, as Jasmine said, we just took it because it was just easier. We're in and out and on to our next project. And essentially we always have multiple exit strategies. So this would have worked as normal. We could have rented all the 21 units out and refinanced later on. We could have sold all of the 21 units and we could have sold to a provider. So we kind of know our numbers and know our end game, and kind of at that point in time have the flexibility within our business model to make those decisions, which is a very good position to be in, especially in today's climate with COVID, with market, with a lot of investors being a bit more wary, a lot of more investors taking a lot more risk for different reasons. It's so varied. So I think it's really, really important for all of us to have our own stance on what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, I agree. So would you consider Staffordshire for future projects in terms of just the location, sort of the planning location that you've been through? Is it on a to-do list, or is it on the never again list?
It's in the work in progress list. Yeah. It's happening.
Okay, good.
So we had planning accepted last week on another building of ours, and we are working on another 3 buildings too.
Brilliant. In and around sort of the ST postcode area. Good stuff.
We'll be seeing you, Amanda, very soon.
I was about to say, I think we're definitely overdue a meetup, so that sounds really good. So for our listeners who might be considering a similar strategy, be it in the Stoke-on-Trent area or perhaps nationwide for some of our listeners further afield, what sort of tips would you have for them? Any sort of initial guidance that you could give, things for them perhaps to look out for that they may not have considered as they're starting to increase the size of their developments?
I think due diligence is super, super important. And I guess everybody has their own level of how much due diligence will be suffice in order for a project to work. But for us, we wouldn't just speak to, for example, one agent. We'd probably speak to 5 or 6.
I mean, in Eastbourne, we spoke to 12.
So research is very, very, very important. And how you conduct that research is kind of entirely up to you and your gut feeling. But for us, we are guided by our numbers and our guts, if that kind of makes sense. And like the area and all these, there's not one thing alone I can give or tip I can give you that works, because in property there's so many different moving parts to making that decision.
Nowadays everybody we speak to, I want to do a conversion, I want to do like land development, I want to be a developer, like, and I understand it because it's like, it sounds so juicy, but the realities of it is if you haven't even done a HMO, like a conversion, it will be a massive leap for you unless you are with somebody that has had an experience like that. And it is just a pure risk at that point. So for me, I think that when you have been in property I don't think it's even a time period. I think that when you feel that you have a few under your belt, you feel confident, and you're now looking to kind of keep interested or challenge yourself a little bit, then I think then it's a good step to go into conversions. And I always think, don't bite off more than you can chew. Go at your own pace. And if you can, and you're a bit worried, partner with somebody or have someone consult even on a project you're doing. Because some people look at, oh, I don't want to pay anybody to be consulting. But that amount of money you pay someone just to consult and give you some advice and kind of walk you through a project is money well spent, especially on your first one, just so you have reassurance, you have an extra set of eyes, and you kind of can be a little bit more efficient, and that will save you so much money in the long run, especially on your first project.
It is important to enjoy it. And also another thing that you can do in property is find the bits that you do enjoy and just focus on them, because there's bits that I don't enjoy that Jasmine does enjoy, and vice versa. And whether you're a partnership or you leverage it out to another person, for example, let's take our social media, for example, Jasmine enjoys it a lot more than I do, because I find it quite mentally draining to see what everybody's doing and people knowing my business. I find that quite daunting.
I don't necessarily love social media, but I think it's super important for there to be people out there that are investing and showing that actually the realities of property are not always so super, super glamorous. It's not always super easy. We didn't get here by luck. We took risks. Sometimes we lose money. Sometimes we make money. Sometimes we are happy about it. Sometimes we are not happy about it. And that's kind of the only reason that I stay motivated to be on social media, because every so often you'll get a message and you'll get someone saying, thank you for your honesty, because no one's given it to us. And
last night
that's really important.
We spoke at a property meet, and I don't know if you realised, Amanda, speaking is not my strength. I don't really particularly enjoy it. I'm not the most confident person. Put me behind my laptop and give me some numbers and I'm good. But I'm getting there, I'm doing it. The amount of nice feedback we receive from being on this event last night, it kind of makes it a little bit more worthwhile. It kind of, you know, it gives me the motivation that if we're helping anybody else who's kind of felt like us or has some sort of kind of interest but is a little bit afraid or lost as to how to start, and if we're helping anybody, that's kind of great in its own way.
Yeah.
Good, that's great to hear. And on that note, tell anyone who's listening a little bit about what you guys do offer in terms of services in that department. I know you have many strings to your bow within your companies, so maybe just share a little bit about the services that you offer.
So we coach. Our coaching is very bespoke and depends upon what the client's needs, wants are, where they'd like to invest, their end goals, how much money they have available, etc. We also offer strategy sessions to help people kind of get going and kind of all revisit their goals and kind of basically plan their property journey a little bit for them.
We source, but not really, more so in a specific area, because as you know, like we invest in the country. So what we found is we kind of have great teams in great areas and we've got a whole infrastructure. And then we end up not really, like if we're currently looking a lot in London and then look a lot of like conversions outside, but we have great residential teams in certain areas like Birmingham, Middlesbrough and Kent. And we've kind of just left them there. So we ended up, if we get deals on our table, we will source them on some of our clients. So
we work with private investors in order to fund our projects.
As we all do. We all need investors.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Okay, ladies, that's been fantastic. I think we've got a great insight as to what's happening at the Hard Hat Developers and also a little bit about your background. If anyone listening wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Instagram is always the best way. So Hard Hat Developers is our Insta handle. Always drop us a message or drop us an email.
Info at the hardhatdevelopers.co.uk.
Amazing. Good stuff. All right. Thank you very much. That's amazing. Lovely to see you both and lovely to hear from you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if so, please hit subscribe and share with those who you think would enjoy it too. To get in touch with Paul and Amanda directly, please visit their website www.essentialpropertyoptions.co.uk for more information. We look forward to sharing with you on the next episode.